Welcome to Mommy Has Questions. Motherhood is hard, but it's even harder when the system is stacked against us. We're four moms who have come together from the big city and the suburbs to call out societal norms that make being a woman feel like a struggle every day, and to spark the change we all need. If you're tired of feeling unsupported and you've got questions, you're not alone. This is your village. Hey everyone, and welcome to Mommy Has Questions. My name is Cristina, and I am here with the lovely Tiffany and Jamie from, among other things, in New York City. And I just want to tell you all a little story to start the episode off today. Moments that made me realize the world wasn't exactly built for women to succeed. It was built by men, for men. And once you see that, you can't really unsee it. The moment that cracked that illusion for me was actually when I became pregnant the first time with my daughter, who is now 6, almost 7. And I had to announce it at work. And there was this moment where I realized, oh, they have decided that since I'm pregnant, they're no longer going to treat me as the rising star that I once was. And that was a really tough pill to swallow. Like, I was taken out to lunches and dinners, and I was made to feel like I was special at work, and I stayed late all the time. Like, I really dove into that grind as the millennial that I am. I worked crazy hours. I had nothing stopping me, right? I was dedicating 150% all the time. And I think the moment that I announced to my boss, who's also the president of the company, that I was pregnant, and it was a smaller agency, a consulting agency that worked with the CDC. So still in the public health space, which you would think would be really supportive of pregnancy, women creating human life. Well, you know how my boss took it? She said, when I had my first child, I only took 2 weeks off. And then I got an au pair, and she basically took care of my kid. And I was like, that's great. That's wonderful for you. However, I don't think that's realistic given the salary that you pay me won't pay for that au pair. And since that point, I felt this vibe shift essentially. That's like, oh, she is with child, so we can no longer give her the amount of responsibility that we were giving her previously. She's going to be gone soon. And I worked extra hard to prove to these people I can do everything. I'm just pregnant. And then also having to fight for a proper maternity leave, because really I only had 4 weeks of paid leave. That was the policy at this time, which is ridiculous. Who recovers in that amount of time? So I had to fight to get 6 weeks paid because that was the sick leave policy. And then the other piece was I had to take 4 weeks unpaid in order to get that time with my newborn child, my first child, who, mind you, would not sleep at all. And while I had time off, this is the best part, is my other boss went and told one of our CDC clients that I was probably not going to come back after maternity leave. And I found this out through the grapevine because everybody gossips, and the worst culprits in my office were the men. So why is he gossiping about me to a client who has no bearings on my employment status? But once I heard that that was the case, I was like, hell no. I am coming back full force, bitches, and you will not hear the last of me. So yeah, I came back. I worked really hard. I came back for my second child too. By that point, we switched up the maternity leave policy because more people were getting pregnant. So we did get 12 weeks paid, which was great. But still, just the whole vibe shift and this gossip and all these things, just assuming that just because I had birthed a child that I needed to limit my career possibilities and potentials, like, that was fucked up. And I was pissed. And that to me was the moment when I realized this world was not built for women to succeed. This is the moment when I am really going full force into feminism. And so, all that being said, now I have a question for you guys. What was your moment when you realized that it's a man's world?
Mhm. Yeah. So first of all, your story is insane. We could go into every aspect just of your story alone around the experiences you had with paid parental leave, but this broader concept of these moments that we've had throughout our lives that have impacted our recognition of sexism that exists in this world. And I think the next step, which is the leading into the feminism aspect of it, is, are you going to take action or not? Or how are you going to react to that experience of sexism that you've had? And so, Christina, in your case, your reaction was to go in deeper and to help change policy and to build all these different things, those are acts of feminism, which we love. Right. And I have very similar pregnancy stories as it relates to work. We had no paid parental leave policy at my company when I had my first child in 2017. I worked for a Fortune 100 company,
Crazy.
and there was no paid parental leave for commissioned employees, which I was at the time as a broker. And it was mind boggling. I remember telling my friends, and they were like, what? And I think it comes from this place of, we were raised to be like, you can do anything. This has all been solved. We're in a good place right now. And we continued to move through this world and uncover that's a bunch of bullshit. Like, we've been fed a ton of lies.
Yep. Yeah. One of the
For real.
biggest we've been fed from our generation is that, hey, you can do anything. Girls can do anything. Well, yeah, we can in theory,
Right.
but not with these systems in place that literally designed to push us out. So unfortunate.
Yep.
I will say I'm fascinated by both of your stories. I did not have that experience because I didn't stay in corporate America for very long. My first corporate job, and I was filling out my health care forms. And I remember on the form, it said that it did not cover birth control, which is literally the only thing that I was taking. Like, that was it. So
That's all you needed healthcare for.
All I needed was just my appointment once a year with the gynecologist and get my birth control. I was like, oh, great. I don't have to pay for that now. I'll have health insurance. And they were like, we don't cover birth control. And then I brought it up to my boss, who was my friend and a woman. And she rolled her eyes and she was like, I know, it's ridiculous. Something about the owner of the company being Catholic or whatever. Then she said, but they cover Viagra.
Of course.
That was my corporate moment of being like, what? Because I'm literally thinking, but who do these men have sex with? Like, we're living in this world where I'm going to give you a pill so that you can have sex whenever you want, as long as you need to, and however much you want, no matter what age you are, but just not help any of the people that you're going to actually be having sex with. But when you ask the question, when did you realize that, we're in a man's world? I don't ever remember not knowing that.
That's interesting.
Because I was raised by all women. And my father was an alcoholic and abusive and dysfunctional and didn't do anything except gamble our money away and show up and be a jerk. So I was so aware from a very, very young age. I was sort of socially conditioned to believe is that men are useless. And not only are they useless, they're dangerous.
Oh, those are big words. Men are
useless. They're dangerous.
But you don't
they are
feel
not
that
to
now.
Be trusted. Yeah.
You don't feel that now. You have, a wonderful husband in partnership. You talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that was like the perception for you from a very early age.
Yeah. I didn't trust my dad. Every time I was alone with him, I did. I was very it's not safe. Usually he was asleep and didn't pay any attention. So it was okay. But I did have a really wonderful grandfather, and I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. Now, he was really, really wonderful to all of us. He was very calm and very gentle and very sweet man, but it was a very patriarchal system. He went to work. My grandmother did all the cleaning, all of the cooking, all of the everything. And she was a feminist. So she would tell us stories about her going to church with him in the 30s and being told to sit in the back of the church because that's where all the women sat. And he invited her to church, but he told her to sit in the back with his sisters and his mother. And she said to him, no, you invited me to church. I'm going to sit with you in the front of the church. And he was like, It's not how it works. The women sit in the back. And she said, no, I'm going to sit with you. And she sat with him at 14 years old, caused this big scandal. And then over time, all the women started sitting with their men in the church.
Wait, and so
That's amazing.
Give context on time and history. So this was your grandmother. She was 14.
My grandmother, yeah.
So this was in like 1910, 1920?
No, she was born in 1918. So this would have been 1932.
The 1930s. Okay.
1932 in Azle, Texas, which is a rural town.
And it was like, wow.
And it was a tiny little church, little Baptist church. And over time, the women sat with them. Now, this is one of my first memories of my grandmother telling me about her life as a child. And she told it to me with such pride.
I love that.
And I knew in that moment, this was an example of, this is what you're up against, kid. Okay. They're like, people are going to tell you to go sit in the back. And I am telling you, go sit with the men. I also remember her saying things to me like, go to college. I don't care what you major in, go to college and get yourself educated. She was a teacher, and she talked a lot about putting herself through college in her 20s. She put herself through college by working a job, going for a year, working for a year, going for a year. So it took her 8 years to get her bachelor's degree. And my grandfather could have paid for it, but he refused because women didn't get educated at that time. She was married to a man who was making plenty of money, and she was a mom, and there was no reason for her to be educated in his eyes. So she worked while he went to work. She went and got odd jobs and saved her own money and put herself through college. So that story was embedded in me.
Right.
Wow.
So I was raised with kind of like this armor, like this world is not built for you. Men are dangerous. The nice ones, like your grandfather, will provide for you, but you can't rely on them to give you what you want. You've got to go out there and you've got to demand it, and you've got to make it for yourself.
Yeah.
How did I get to Marshall? Really crappy boyfriends.
Yeah.
A lot of dating my dad in my 20s. And then I think on some level, I knew that I couldn't put up with that. I couldn't be my mom and stay married to a crappy man for decades.
Yeah.
So I just didn't get married for a really long time. I was just going to be single, and I was just going to do it all on my own. And it wasn't worth it because I kept having these bad relationships.
Yeah.
And then I kind of manifested my husband. I did that whole thing of like, well, what is it I really, really want?
The practical magic moment where you put all the pieces in the thing and then you send it up.
Yeah, I was like,
into
okay,
the world.
I wanted
one
to be
green eye, one blue.
That's it. Be kind and gentle like my grandfather and good provider, but I also need him to understand who I am and let me be myself and let me build my own career. And then I met him, and that was it. And then 5 years later, we got married. 5 years later, we had a kid. It still took a long time because I wasn't very trusting.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think that's an important piece too, Tiff. We're in this moment where there's backlash against the fact that people are getting married older. Just earlier today, I saw memes that were like, well, back in the day, 80% of people got married under 30, and now it's only 30%. But the reality is you waited until you understood what you actually needed. And that takes time.
100%.
Like, we don't know who we are or what we want. For example, I was still guided under my parents' conservative beliefs until I went to grad school and realized, oh, wait, there's a whole different world of people over here. And guess what? My beliefs have completely changed.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is we change so much, and we understand through lived experience to overcome. Like, I had a lot of internalized misogyny that I didn't realize I had personally. And luckily, my husband has been with me along for the journey. So, like, lucky for him, he now has a raging feminist that he married that was not a raging feminist beforehand. So, but that's the thing. We grow so much in those early years of adulthood and undo a lot of the learning that we had grown up with. And if we're not given that time and space to do that, a lot of us might be stuck with the wrong partner, unfortunately. Tiff, you know how we're all busy moms carrying a mental load that feels like 12 tabs open on Google, and then your kid does something so cute that you want to freeze it forever, not just as a photo, but actually capturing the moment.
I know exactly what you mean. And sometimes you want to capture more than just a photo. You want to capture what is truly happening in the moment and not forget the meaning behind the photo.
Well, now there's an app to do exactly that. Poppy is the beautifully designed photo app that lets you add voice notes to your photos so you can tell the story behind the smile in seconds.
Yep. Now you can capture the moments that matter effortlessly with Poppy, the voice note memory app for modern moms. Download on iOS or tap our show notes and use our promo code Mommy Has Poppy for 3 months free at checkout.
Thinking back to my childhood, Tiffany, it was just such a juxtaposition from yours in the sense that I grew up in suburban New Jersey. My dad worked in New York City every day, got up, went to work, came home. My mom stayed at home with us for most of my childhood. She did go back to work eventually. So yeah, I was in this kind of bubble of like, you can do and be anything. And I played sports and I did art and I danced and I went to school. There were no like barriers. If I wanted to do something or I wanted to try something, yes, do it and try it. But I wasn't fully attuned to or aware that there were inequities or differences in what I was being offered and maybe what boys were being offered or given until college, I think, is where I started to really like pick my head up a little bit and see certain things. And some of it came in the form of sport. So I played soccer through my college career. And I remember this one moment where we started to realize that our team was being treated differently than the boys' team and felt like we had a ground to raise it because we were being very successful as a program. We were winning. We were moving the program in a different direction. We had a new female coach. When I came in as a freshman, we made it to the NCAA tournament for the first time. So we were bringing like all these things to the school and to the program. So now you are all of a sudden like, oh, I have a soapbox that I can like speak from. And it was stupid little things, right? Like the boys team was allowed to practice on our game field, which was this immaculate, perfectly groomed, beautiful field that they wanted to maintain for games. But the boys were allowed to practice on it before big games. We were never allowed to. And we found out and we were like, wait a second. And we went to our coach and we were like, why are the boys allowed to practice on the game field? We were told nobody can practice on that field before games, but they're getting extra time on that field to allow them to get used to that field and comfortable and like ready for the game.
It's a big advantage.
And she was like, you're right. And she went to the athletic director. And then all of a sudden, the day before games, when we had our practice, we were allowed to also do a practice on the game field to get ready. But again, it was like, why we had to ask and why wasn't it available? Okay. Same thing with uniforms, just little teeny things where all of a sudden I realized, wait a second, we are not being moved through this world in an equitable way as our male peers are. And then I started like really opening my eyes to things. I remember coming into college as a freshman, hearing about women's studies courses and being like, why would you need to study women? Why would you want to take a women's studies class? What value is it to take a women's studies class? Like super judgmental about it, and had teammates and peers and friends who took women's studies classes and being like, that's a waste of education and money and time. Like,
yeah. And then you took it.
And then I took a women's studies class.
And your mind was like, blown.
Yeah. What? Like all these theories and things we can study and history that we're not being taught and told. And I was a sociology major. So it was like there was a good interplay between the two fields. And wow.
I was so interested in literature when I was in junior high and high school and was reading all the time. And any American literature, like I went down John Steinbeck and then I went down an Ernest Hemingway and every classic American author. I was like, I got to read every single book. And I remember my favorite English teacher was a man and he was lovely. And he really took notice of me because I always had books that we weren't reading in class. And he'd be like, we're not reading that book. I'm like, I know. I checked it out from the library. I'm reading it. And he was like, what? You're just reading? Like on this, like as not part of an assignment?
Yeah.
But I remember being in his class and really loving learning about story and literature. And he had all these authors, all the major American authors, all, like pictures of them all around the room, right? Like teachers decorate their classrooms. And I remember sitting there just feeling so intellectual and at home in his class. That was like the class where you sit down and you get your books all straightened on your desk and you're like ready to learn, right? Yeah. Like I was excited about this class.
Your pencil case is out. Right. Exactly. Your notebook page was clean.
Totally. Yeah. Like I'm a good student. And I remember sitting there going, I am going to write one day. I'm going to be like these writers. And I remember looking around at the pictures and going, there's not a woman. There's not one
Yep.
woman on this wall.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to Emily Dickinson, right? Who, by the way, is really old. I just want to point out, like, we're talking about like the one woman that we could study, right? Emily Dickinson and her poetry. And it's like, yeah, that was what, hundreds of years ago? Like, really? In all these years, we don't have one other female author that we can, put. And then we got to sort of Toni Morrison and Alice Walker. And I remember reading Toni Morrison and my mind being blown open about racism in a way that I had never thought, because she's such a beautiful writer and she puts you right into the shoes. I read The Bluest Eye, which now is banned in the South. I just want to point out. Bluest Eye is now banned, and I think The Color Purple is as well. Anyway, those books were huge mind benders for me. But I also remember when I started studying acting and getting really into acting and thinking, I want to like win an Oscar and I want to be like this fabulous actress. And I would always use the word actress. And Daniel Day-Lewis was doing Last of the Mohicans, and I was like, oh, it's such a good movie, and he's so brilliant. And he wins the Oscar, and Tom Hanks wins, and all these men. And then there was Meryl Streep, right? It was like men. And then Meryl. Meryl, the one. That's the one that like we can think of as a really, really excellent actor. And I was talking about it to my guy friend, my male actor friend. This was in college when I was majoring in theater. And we were talking about our favorite actors. And he said, and that's also when I stopped using the word actress, because we were taught, no, it's an actor. Everybody is an actor, because men can play women and women can play men. If you're a really good actor, you can act anything, right? So that's when I started calling myself an actor instead of an actress, which I would get constant corrections from people outside the business. I still to this day will say I'm an actor, and they'll go, don't you mean actress? And I'm like, no, I don't. I'm saying actress. Thank you. I do know my own vocation. Appreciate you correcting me, mansplaining to me. But I remember having this conversation with this guy in college, and we were talking about our favorite actors, and he says to me, Meryl Streep by far is my favorite actor. And I remember saying to him, like, I know as a woman, she's so great.
Oh,
this is a mansplaining moment. That was good. He stopped me and he goes, no, I think she's better than the men. What I'm saying is, I think she's the best actor of all time. Not actress, not the best female actor, but just the best actor. And I remember at that moment being like, oh my God, I have been so entrenched in this misogyny, in this patriarchy, that I am judging Meryl as like, yeah, she's really good for a woman.
Well, it's the moments that you realize once you cross that threshold, which, Tiff, you crossed it way before I did, fortunately. But it took me more time because I had to unlearn a lot of stuff. But once I opened up my eyes, I saw so many little moments where I was like, that is sexism. That is sexism. That is sexism. And it's not until the patriarchy stops benefiting you that you understand that it is not actually benefiting everyone, because it is just continuing this veil of illusions of benefits, when in reality the only people that it benefits are the people at the very, very top rungs of society, and they're just continuing on. And so yeah, to me that was a big thing where I'm like, oh wait, I was totally happy being a guy's girl and saying, oh, don't worry, I'm not like all those other girls, I'm so cool. Meanwhile, intending to put down other women, but I was carrying water for the patriarchy until I got to that point where like it was being pregnant at work or whatever. And I realized, oh, they realize that I'm a woman now. And now I no longer am benefiting from carrying that water for the patriarchy.
Right.
And so I am ashamed to say it took me to that point, but I now realize that we gotta get better at teaching the younger generations earlier on.
I don't think you need to be ashamed. I think it's really important to recognize that in ourselves as we all kind of move through this process and on our own individual journeys around, awareness, self-discovery, seeking equity, acts of feminism, all of it. I remember coming into the corporate world after graduating from college and thinking, I enjoy working in an all male environment because working with women is so hard. Women are so catty. Women talk behind each other's backs with like all these tropes about women and being like, it's just so much easier working with all men. Like that was so deeply internalized.
Where did you get that from?
I don't know.
You don't even know.
I mean,
Yeah. You heard it.
just-
It was
yeah.
just like information you gathered from various things.
Maybe it was also to justify my own work experience that I was only working with all men, that there were no women for me to work with. That
It
there
must
were
be
no
because they're
female.
hard to work with. That must be why they're not around.
Why there aren't any female role models, why there aren't any senior women in my company, why there isn't anybody I can model my career after and look up to. They just must be really difficult, and I'm going to be better, and I'm going to be like a man, and I'm just going to do it like a man. And
Exactly.
what?
Do it like a man. That was ingrained in me as a child also. Like, do everything like a man because you will succeed if you do that.
Yes.
And for me specifically, I've talked about this before on our previous season, but like I was raised in a very traditional, like machista Southern Italian household where the boys were prized and the girls were just support staff. And I literally could get straight A's, do extremely well in sports, like do all the things. And my brother could just show up and be like, I read a book for the first time, and it'd be like, oh, little baby John, like, oh,
He's so smart.
Yeah. So anyway, it was ingrained in me for a long time that men were just always going to be more successful than women. That's just how society worked. And so I pushed that narrative too.
Yeah.
And it's shit.
It's
shit.
Such bullshit. And it's not only is it shit, it's failing. I think it's at the crux of why so many systems now are failing, right? And we're like in this moment in time, we're finding that the world is sort of being shooken up and we're having to reevaluate all kinds of things. And I think ultimately it's just like we can't continue to just keep perpetuating this lie that men are better than women. It's just a lie. That's all it is. It's just a big fat lie. I mean, I can think of so many moments, right? Like I loved art. So I would go to museums and I loved post-French Impressionism was like my jam. So anytime there was an exhibit for Matisse or Renoir, right? It was like I was there first day with my mom and we were walking and they were all men, right? And then there was Marie Cassatt. And my mom had Marie Cassatt, and we would sit and we would look, and then we would both, my mom and I both, would look at her beautiful, beautiful artwork, which was mostly women and children, because that's what she was doing and that's what she was around to paint, right? Because she didn't get to go to work. And we were flipping through the book and talking about her technique and really analyzing it and just being like, she's a woman. She was a woman. And look, there's an art book about her. Like, because she's literally the only one. Can you name another painter from that era that is a woman? You can't. There was one that managed to break through. Now, mind you, there were others. The thing is that the others just didn't get their moment in history, that the way the men just get their moments in history, right? Because nobody would even show their artwork. They wouldn't get shown. They wouldn't get put into the galleries. They wouldn't be put into the salons. They wouldn't be part of the conversation just because they were women, which is why you have to go take women's studies college courses to learn about them.
Right.
Well, I mean, and let's not even forget like how many women disguise themselves as men throughout history to achieve what they couldn't as women because women were just cast aside.
Shakespeare wrote so many plays with strong women dressed as men to make the situation happen in the way that they needed it to happen. And then, of course, he had to cast men to play women to dress up as men in order to even represent that story because women weren't even allowed on stage. Like it's bananas.
Yes.
Bananas.
So this is amazing, these conversations, because I think what I'm hoping is what it triggers for people who are listening to just think back into their own lives around the experiences they had. I mean, look, at the end of the day, obviously, if you're listening to our podcast, you've got some sort of a feminist bent in you to begin with. Like you
probably figured this out if you're clicking on this and listening.
We live in, we all are in our own little internet silos and bubbles. We know this now. And so like you found us. Welcome. what what we always try to do here is to figure out like, okay, but then where do we take it? Where do we go from here? And what are the next steps? And I think what is important is when we examine these experiences in our lives is then, okay, that happened. And then what did I do about it? Or how did I change my trajectory in life? Or how did I change how I operate in this world? Or even the language I use or the way I approach people or how I listen to people.
Yeah.
Like examining all of those things and just continuing to do those things and continuing to seek to generate change is what we're looking to achieve here. Because again, and I'll say our closing a little early on, but like continuing the conversation is part of the solution, right? We're having these conversations, we're thinking about these experiences, we're going back in our lives, but then we're solutioning forward. And what does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's important to, at this age and this privilege that I have now, I call it out as much as I can. And I try to find ways to do it with humor because usually that lands a little bit better.
Sure.
And I say it to men a lot. Like I'll find, like with my male friends, I don't really have to do it with my husband that much because he lives with me and he's already taken the pink pill, so to speak. But but with my male friends, I'll talk about this podcast and I'll have male friends of mine be like, well, I'm not the audience. I'm like, actually, you are the audience. It would be I would really appreciate you listening. And I'll give them like a specific episode to listen to. And I'm like, I really appreciate it if you could listen and let me know what you think. Because I think a lot of these concepts and all of these ideas might really resonate with you. And I've had a couple of them come back and be like, yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah. It made me think.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, good. You just have to sort of find ways to introduce the concepts and let them know that like women's issues are human issues. This fight is a human rights issue. And as any human, it should matter to you that other humans have rights. Because at some point, even men having to provide for women puts them in a box. It limits what they want to do maybe with their life, right? Because now they have to take care of all the women in their life because women aren't allowed to take care of themselves, right? So it ripples in the water. It always affects everyone. So finding a way to make it more of a universal conversation, I think, is also key.
Yeah, I like that. Cristina, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think opening up people's eyes just slowly to say, hey, like, did you think that maybe what you just said was a little bit sexist? And doing it in a way where it's not an attack. And this goes back for me, just reminding people we are not here to bash men. What our goal here is to push back against the system, to not be silent in the face of the system and continue these misogynistic ways that have just been so pervasive through society. Our goal here is to say, let's pause, let's revisit that moment like we just did today with our stories and say, hey, maybe what was occurring or what is occurring is not actually good for all of humanity. So let's take a step back and really listen to one another, listen to our experiences, and just be open to understanding different ways of thinking because that's what it takes. Yeah. So
I
that's
agree.
my thought. But yeah, I mean, this was great.
Thanks for bringing the conversation up and the thoughts and the stories because it triggered a lot of things for me in my mind too.
I mean, there are so many moments we could go back to in our lives, and we'll keep doing it. But if anybody in the audience wants to let us know what your moment was when you awakened to the illusions of patriarchal society, let us know. Feel free to email us. But thank you, ladies, so much, as always, for having a beautiful conversation and opening up our eyes to new ideas.
Thanks, Cristina.
Bye, guys.
Jinx.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Mommy Has Questions is brought to you by, among other things, a vibrant moms collective that provides in-person programming and online content. For more information, please visit momsamongotherthings.com. This episode was produced by Cristina Sansone and directed by Tiffany Hodges, with theme music by Juan Carlos Enriquez. Hit subscribe to catch our next episode and rate and review us to let others join our village.